Today's guest sits right in the intersection of sport, engineering, and performance innovation. Braeden Ostepchuk is a former elite hockey player turned mechanical engineer and co-founder of a portable polymer cooling device that's changing how athletes think about heat management and recovery. What makes Braeden's story interesting isn't just the product, it's how he built it. Speed to market over perfection, simplicity over complexity, education over hype. We get into the science behind polymer cooling, why most recovery tools fall at adoption, what wearable data gets wrong, and how engineers, and not just clinicians, are shaping the future of performance. If you care about staying relevant in sport, rehab, or business, this conversation will hit home.
You know, the easiest analogy is just your body's a lot like a car, and if the engine overheats, you're in trouble. So it's the same thing with your core. You know, the number one way to fail as a business is to never launch. So you got to get out there and learn. Find the intersection between your strengths and your purpose and your passion. And you know, whatever you're doing next, if you want to do anything meaningful, it's gonna be hard. So it's much more tolerable to do hard things when you enjoy it and are excited about it.
Braeden, welcome to the show.
Hey Tom, thanks for having me. Really excited to chat more, and I appreciate the invitation to join you.
Well, I'm excited about this because I've known about polymer cooling for quite a while, and a lot of the devices out there are big, clunky, still kind of in the lab. But I mean, most people assume building something like this, like a recovery tech, comes from physios or kinesiologists or strength coaches, but you're an engineer who played pro hockey. Take us back. How did those two worlds collide?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of it was just good fortunes and, you know, the way things in life come together. But my background, I grew up playing hockey my whole life, and I ended up at Norwich University playing Division III hockey there. So hockey my whole life, that's all I wanted to do. I was fortunate to be at a really good program and played a few years of pro hockey after. But being that I was a Division III athlete, I tried to take my academics seriously, and I studied mechanical engineering. So I came from academic background of mechanical engineering, but then also the hockey background as an athlete. And being able to play at that level and then play pro as well, had access to the best and really good resources in evolving sports technology. This was in the 2010s. You started seeing a lot of new brands and products really starting to emerge in fitness and recovery technology, as well as just having really great athletic trainers and PTs and strength coaches and, you know, good facilities and just all around good people. So I was exposed to what the elite in performance and technology and recovery looks like, and then I had an engineering background. And then it just so happened that this really came out of having a passion for biohacking and human physiology, which is sort of how, after I retired from hockey in 2020, I needed to channel my energy and my passion in a new direction. That got me into the world of biohacking and fitness and just going down every rabbit hole I could possibly go down. And that's when I discovered the research on palm cooling, saw what was out there, and then the idea just sort of came that I think there was a different way that we could solve and approach this problem, and that was really the genesis of what has become Cooler.
How much of being an athlete and being exposed to tech really shape how you thought about product design?
Oh, massively. I probably wouldn't have thought or even considered the possibility of trying to create a product to take to market in this world without having been a customer first. You know, like it started off with the massage guns and the compression boots that came out, and then, you know, started transitioning to more of the wearables and the data. So, you know, the Hyperices and Therabodies, you know, in the locker room first. But then you'd have your game readies, you'd have your other type devices there, and then it was starting to go into whoops and the auras, and then it's just continued to evolve. I mean, it's taken off in all sorts of different directions nowadays. But I think that was essential because the awareness that there is a market and there's a possibility and there's a need and there are users, if you haven't experienced that firsthand and if you're not in the locker rooms, I mean, I probably never would have come across these brands or these products or taken them as seriously. So I think that had a huge impact.
So why polymer cooling? When there's so many other devices you could have leaned into, the compression, the wearables, why polymer cooling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I have a good answer other than I found out about the research, went down a rabbit hole, and I went to a hardware store and bought some copper pipe fittings and threw them in the fridge and was testing it out, just self-experimenting. And I validated sufficiently for myself that this works. And I did deep dives in the physiology, and just from a, you know, pure basic physics and thermodynamics, it makes sense. From a physiology and thermoregulation, it makes sense. And then there was this missing piece of what is the physical intervention or product that can do that, but then do that easily. And then after it just sort of planted a seed in my head, and I had an idea of what I thought a form factor could look like, it just stuck with me and never left, and not even really explainable. It's just one of those things where I woke up every single day since thinking about it and thinking, okay, I think there's something here that's relevant and useful, and it's almost just an artist's need to express it out in the world, and it just eats at you alive if you are unable to do that. And then I'd say the other factors at the time, just moving on from my career outside of hockey, is I had an entrepreneurial bug, wanted to build things of my own, and it just sort of tied in that, hey, here's this idea that I'm chewing on, and it's relevant to my background academically and my interests, and as an athlete, and I want to go out and just build something. So all those different forces sort of came together, and I just said, this is the thing, this is my thing that I want to do, and we're gonna see it through.
For those who don't understand, the palm, the physiology, the anastomoses, like the cooling system and how that glabrous skin, really dispels heat. Can you explain why more palmar cooling, not ice baths or vests or cold
Yeah.
towels?
Yeah, so the unique aspect you mentioned is the optimal anatomical location is the hand. So the palms of the hands have glabrous skin. This glabrous skin also exists in the upper face, so above the beard line and the forehead, upper face, and then also the bottoms of your feet, so the soles of your feet. So those are three areas unique to the body that have glabrous skin, which is characterized by being non-hairy, so there's no hair follicles. And then it also has, you mentioned, the arteriovenous anastomoses, so the AVAs. And they're not quite capillaries, but they're comparable, and they're really just shunts to increase or decrease blood flow. And so this is why if you get frostbite in winter, you're going to get it in your toes and fingers first, just like your face is going to get cold, because your body's going to shunt blood. It's going to keep it from going there so you can protect the heat in the core.
Yeah.
On the other side of the equation, when you're overheating, you're going to rapidly increase blood flow to these extremities, and these function a lot like radiators on the human body. So you have really, really dense blood flow, and blood flow into your hands in a state of heat stress or hyperthermia can increase 16-fold over baseline. So enormous blood flow to your hands and feet. And you've got basically, it's like the best way to think about it is a car radiator. We have these constant, piping going through, with their coolants going through. So you have massive surface area at this interface where heat can dissipate. And then as you remove the heat out of the coolant, or in the human's case, the blood, that's going to recirculate through the body. So, the easiest analogy is just your body's a lot like a car. And if the engine overheats, you're in trouble. So it's the same thing with your core. The coolant is your blood, and it's going to get it to the radiators. And then you have your hands, and the hands, preferable in most cases over the face or feet just for practicality, especially if you're wearing shoes and socks, that's not always accessible in the face. So the hands, easy to access, large surface area, rapid heat transfer. The objective then becomes an engineering problem. How do we take this interface and just maximize the rate of heat transfer out of it so we can remove as much body heat as possible?
And we talked about this before, there needs to be a specific temperature, because not cold enough, it's not going to remove heat fast enough, but too cold is not going to work either. How did you come to that sweet spot, that Goldilocks temperature to maximize heat without closing down or causing vasoconstriction?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. So to your point, there's definitely an optimal zone. So there's going to be a maximum on your curve, but it's definitely not a black or white. Too cold is too cold, and too warm is too warm. So it's definitely a continuum, right? There's a curve, because even if, in theory, even if you had an interface that's 90 degrees Fahrenheit and your skin is 93 Fahrenheit, or let's say, call it 30 Celsius and 33 Celsius,
Yeah.
you're still going to have heat transfer come out. So you're trying to find the optimal point. Vasoconstriction, if you're too cold, there is still blood flowing through your hands, but it's obviously a lot less. So what's kind of the sweet spot? So I would say our approach to doing that was, you want to maximize temperature gradient as much as possible. So you want to be able to go as cold as possible, because that is one of the variables that's directly proportional to the rate of heat transfer. But you also need to do that within the confines of device and form factor. Like in a perfect world, the probably the best thing you could do is have a chilled tub of water that you circulate your hand in all the time. But then from, building a product and having, practical implementation, it sort of goes out the window relatively quickly. And, one of our challenges too is, like, we built our device to be completely thermoelectric cooling. So there's no water, there's no ice, there's no prep. And that was where, I think we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later, but that's where it's the focus on simplicity and then practicality and ease of use on a consumer side, which is a whole different level of product development versus the technical specs. So we came to the way we built it and the way we targeted is just trying to find what is the sweet spot that maximizes everything. And temperature is one of the variables that optimizes heat rate, but it's not the only. Duration will matter, and that's going to be dependent on use case, but also just total surface area and contact area. But then also what your interface is. So our entire device is aluminum housing. So if you have conductive heat transfer, and aluminum has a high rate of thermal conductivity, even at a small temperature gradient, I mean, it's going to be 100-fold of just heat transferring into air. So It's a long-winded way of saying you could go really, really deep on calculations and curves and optimizing, but a lot of it was experimental and fitting within an architecture that's usable and feasible for the end user.
Where do you see, there's other products on the market, and you touched upon some of the problems. I think the ones I heard about, it was on Huberman. They have like
Yep.
water. They use water through
Yeah.
mints.
Yeah.
And again, when I heard that, I'm like, that's so cumbersome. It sounds like it's bulky. It's not easily transportable, and
Hmm.
it's only going to be valid for the scientist, the lab guy,
Yeah.
right? Let's bring in these athletes and test them to see if our hypothesis is working. But you go into market, and from having a clinic with multiple practitioners, they want ease of use. If
Yeah.
it takes a ton of time or a lot of brain energy to figure out how to do an ultrasound or a laser, they won't use it. They will not use it. And I think it holds true for the consumer. We just want simple. Why did iPhone kill BlackBerry? Because the
Yeah.
BlackBerry, you need to be a phone technician to
Hmm.
figure the damn thing out. And that iPhone's just like, oh, you just turn it on and it does it all for you. Magic.
Yeah.
And that's what it
Yeah.
sounds like. Your product is like the iPhone. It wasn't first to market,
Right.
but it was a much more user face friendly product. Which
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I appreciate the comparison, and that's totally not fair. We're far from Apple, and I'm far from Steve Jobs. But the thought process was there, and really great products that come into market, you have to have a really easy customer experience or user experience. It has to be intuitive. It has to be simple, and you have to remove as much friction as possible because every layer of friction or complexity compounds on the difficulty and likelihood of adoption. And so when we've got this new technology, so you mentioned the CoolMit, which was part of the initial Stanford research and the technology transfer. I mean, it pioneered and paved the way for this to be validated as this is an actual tool or methodology that can make a difference. And it works fantastic. But there's a difference between having a large and complicated contraption and then something that's friendly at scale to the people who need it. So it's like you said, it's when Apple, and even going back before the iPhone, when they came out with, the Mac, and when they came out, with the Apple One and Apple Two, where it's taking large mainframe computers and turning into a personal computer, being able to remove and strip away as much friction. And then, the other thing that like Apple does really well, and you could throw companies like Tesla in there, Dyson in there. They're also just, beautiful. If you want to get into the consumer market, it's got to, design matters, ease of use matters. And those are some of the intangibles that go well beyond purely, clinical science. And if you base your entire product concept on, two published studies with 12 subjects and saying this is exactly the way and the only way that this can work, it makes it challenging. So there's a definite mix between art and science that has to come into play. And, humans are emotional and irrational, and there's elements that go beyond just pure numbers. So it's a lot of that is you kind of have to use your thoughts and ideas, but it's experimentation and getting to market and seeing what people like and adapting. You got to be iterative, which is challenging on hardware products. So the iteration cycles are much slower.
yeah.
You iterate as fast as you can, as opposed to nowadays a lot of software or apps you can iterate really, really quickly. But those are definitely ideas that we had in mind with coming to how can we make something that's small and easy and looks good and is simple. Simple goes a long way.
What iteration are you on right now, or how many iterations have you gone through?
So, well, for full hardware, this is probably, I guess you could say, the second family of iterations of design. But within there, as you go through the design and prototyping process, there's a lot of micro iterations and tweaks along the way. So, you could say 2.xxxxx goes down the list.
Yeah.
But we also have, because it's an electronic controlled. So, we've got a circuit board in there, and then we can control the cooling cycle and duration. So we can adjust firmware. We've gone through a lot of iterations of firmware as well. So there's levels to the iteration, but this would be the second, let's say, family of a physical form factor.
Is is it just a one button? I haven't gotten mine yet. I haven't gotten one yet. But can you adjust the temperature? Is there a range? Like you said when we talked about kind of the optimal
Hmm.
range. Can people increase, decrease temperature, or is it a one button push? And does it calibrate on its own based on amount of heat coming in? Like, can you explain a little bit about the user process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now it's super simple. Right now, you got this, pull the trigger, turn it
Yeah.
on, and it runs a preset cycle, and it'll just run that cycle, and it'll be the exact same. And the way it's working is it's putting current through the thermoelectric cooler, and that's creating a temperature gradient, and then it's got airflow running through it. But on our roadmap, we have plans where add in using sensors and control system in a mobile app where you can actually have it where it would not only be controllable, where you could set, and adjust temperature or duration specific to whatever your needs are, but then also have it adapted to what your body temperature is, what your readings are. And then you can start getting with really smart, intelligent cooling. That's a little further along on the product roadmap, and that's where we'd like to see it go. But right now, it's real simple. It's you grab it, grip it, rip it, hold it, and then get back to whatever you're doing.
Now you mentioned before you care more about speed to market than perfection. Why is that?
I think out of necessity.
Yeah.
Uh, Hardware is expensive and slow, and it's Murphy's Law is especially relevant. Uh, you get into supply chain, you get into manufacturing, you get into production. I mean, there's a million ways for things to go wrong, but we're also in the place of it's a new product type, relatively new. I mean, we have some competitors, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a new product concept in a new category. And there's not enough data or evidence to say, hey, if you do this, you're going to be fine and you're going to be off to the races. We're not entering an entrenched market where people know that this is a commodity. People are going to buy it and people are going to need it. I don't know, a better toothbrush. There's always going to be people buying toothbrushes. There's not always going to be people buying palm coolers, at least not yet. That's not established. So I think you got to go as fast as you can because capital's hard to come by and it's expensive up front, and you need to learn as much as possible. And you can run through market research and user testing, and you can do in-house iterations. You can do all that stuff, but keep in mind it's expensive to prototype and to tweak and to go through those cycles with hardware. But there's only so much you learn until you get something out in the world. And just going back to your reference on Apple, Apple One sold maybe 200 products their first round, and then Apple Two came around and did a whole lot more. Uh, but it's you can learn an enormous amount from getting out of the market. And if you have the ability to build something and validate that people will buy it and use it and benefit from it, then that is a huge stamp of approval on what you've done, as well as then you can say, okay, here's everything we learned from that, and now let's go about it again. But I just think from studying history, perfection is the enemy of good or of done. Like done is better than perfect. And at some point you got to launch, and
Yeah.
the number one way to fail as a business is to never launch. So you got to get out there and learn.
Yeah, like any product that or course or whatever, what's the problem? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And with the cooler, is it recovery? Is it performance? Is it more heat management? Or is it all three? Can you really isolate one more than the other? Or does one take priority over the other? I guess my question I guess my question would be what major problem in the market were you trying to solve at this point to say yes, this is a good idea.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and it's relative to depending on who the user is, what's the sport, is it an athlete or is it a practitioner, and that's part of why we got to go to market because we got to get out in the world and have different people using it. Is it an athletic trainer trying to prevent heat illness? Is it a strength coach trying to increase exercise capacity? Is it an athlete just trying to feel better? And so that's another reason to get to market because we're in that it's a dangerous trap when there's 100 things you could do or 100 people you could sell to or could benefit from it, and then you try to please everyone and you end up pleasing no one.
Yeah.
So part of it is discovering that. I think the main intent though is more of a performance angle, and I would say recovery with the lens of real-time recovery. So as opposed to a post-workout recovery or a pre-warm-up or a pre-activity warm-up or activation, this is kind of a new way of approaching can I recover in the moment? So in the game, on the bench or on the sideline or in the dugout, whatever it is, or in the gym like while you're training in between sprints, and then regain that extra muscle capacity in that real time so that you can extend your performance. To me, that's where I feel the value proposition is most resonating. But, depends who you talk to and what goals they're trying to accomplish. So if I go out to certain teams in certain sports, you got to tailor your message and your value proposition to what is most relevant to them.
Yeah, because you can have, I mean, it applies to every single human being that's doing some level of performance, but if you try and talk to everybody, you talk to nobody.
Yeah.
And even though the physiology is the same for every single human being and the physics work the same, yeah, talking to the right audience, especially early on, is so critical. What's your strategies for getting it out there? I mean, we talked a little bit about trade shows, anything along those lines? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Where do you feel like your efforts are best directed?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First of all, I'd say everything is a volume game. You've got to do a lot of reps at whatever you're doing before you can really assess if it's working or not working. I'd say it gets split up into a few different angles. If it's more team organization based, definitely trade shows. So, we've been out at NSCA and NATA and some of the more sports specific trade shows where you can have a really concentrated group of professionals or practitioners in a specific domain. But then also just, through networking, through people and I happen to know quite a few people in hockey, which helps. And then as well as just people you meet through other sports and other companies and other teams and, you know, cold calling and cold email and going to conference and meeting people is just high volume game. You just try and get in front of as many eyeballs as you can and present here's this thing that we made. We're really excited about it and we think there's value for you and would you be interested in trying it? That's really the starting point that has got us in with most teams. Let's say teams or schools or organizations where it's a little bit more what you'd classify as B2B. On the consumer side, we started with a Kickstarter in 2024, so that naturally gives you broad exposure to a wide variety of potential customers. And then it's also just been more traditional, social media ads, through different ad platforms, and trying to find different audiences, a different creative that resonates and gets people interested. And then what comes with that is a little bit of word of mouth, and then you can bring in affiliates. But it's really there's so many ways of going about it, and the challenge is, like I'd said, trying to talk to everyone. The challenge is figuring out what is the optimal, not the best necessarily, because it's early and it's hypotheses that you need to test and validate, but what are the optimal audiences and the messages and then the channels to get to them, and then can you do that successfully and repeatably and scalably? And those are challenges across the board for any business when you're trying to acquire customers and get your product or service out there.
I want to take a quick break from today's episode to share something I believe every rehab and performance professional should know about. For years, I saw too many clients go through the same cycle: short-term fixes, temporary relief, and then the same issues coming back again. That's why I built the Advanced Movement Therapist certification. It's not just another course, it's a system that helps you identify the real cause of a client's pain, give them results that actually last, and stand out in a crowded industry. You'll get practical tools and strategies that you can take straight into your sessions so you can help people get better faster. If you're ready to become the go-to clinician in your community, head to amtcertified.ca to learn more. That's amtcertified.ca. Your clients will thank you. What's the feedback been like so far?
Mostly positive. We've got a new product, so we've had some kinks along the way, obviously. And the great thing about early customers is they'll give you their wish list up front. So everyone wants a bigger, better, faster, always for everything. Which is great. So that it really pushes you to be creative and think like, okay, how can we make this thing even better? For future versions. But generally, love the ease. Fits in seamlessly to the workouts. We found really strong fit with high intensity type training. So think of like the CrossFit type person, the High Rocks type person, where it directly fits into with what they're doing. We've seen really good interest in baseball, especially with pitchers. There's a lot of relevance towards heat and then fatigue, and then certainly injury prevention is top of mind for a lot of people in baseball. But just love the simplicity. People are anxious, I think, for us to be able to add an app and add some cool things and make it a little more customizable, but easy, fast, and we've got good feedback. We've got some repeat orders. We've got people calling for us, so it's been awesome.
So have you looked at, some of the big players, just as you mentioned CrossFit, some of the big equipment suppliers? Have you brought it up to any of the big distributors, Perform Better, Rogue, or anything along those lines? Or are we there yet? Or have you guys thought about that?
Definitely thought about it. We've had some conversations. We do have one wholesale agreement right now with Medco Sports Medicine, so for the sports medicine market in the U.S.
Yep.
And so we've gotten into those, but we're still pretty early. We just got 6 months ago, we just got our first batch of production units in. So we're still in the early stage and working through. And a lot of those processes are a lot slower. There's trials and demos and checks and planning and things. So we've got conversations ongoing. We've got plans for that. And, certainly we're trying to think about and explore every partner and opportunity there is to get in front of the right people. So that's ongoing.
We talked about wearables, and just thinking now how everyone is so, I need to dial in my sleep because
Hmm.
sleep is that ultimate performance enhancer. and we need to get our core temperature to the right temperature. Has anyone, or has anyone looked at using it right like before bed to drop the core temperature that 1 degree and then measure against their Whoop or their aura
Yeah.
ring of like, hey, I got way more deep sleep just from adding this one thing, right? I just thought of that right now, and how important core temperature is and how quickly we need to drop that out. So even a market of, hey, does your sleep suck? We this can help, right? It's not just
Oh
about
yeah.
performance between sets. It's like we can drop your core temperature down pretty quick, with this
Yeah.
device, and all of a sudden you're going to get more REM, more deep sleep, and you're going to get more restorative sleep, which ties into the recovery side of things, not just in between sets, but from a sleep perspective.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. So anecdotally, I've done it, not with reliable enough data to,
Sure.
to publish or stand behind. So it's, pretty crude and biased. So it's not really fair anyways, but definitely see that. And, the classics for how do you optimize your sleep? It's cool, dark, quiet. Those are the big three. Well, cool is a big one, core temperature. And I suspect most people that have ever tried sleeping when they're too hot can relate to the fact that temperature plays a massive deal in quality of sleep. And it's shut it off the rooftops, and that's 8 Sleep's bread and butter, and so many other companies like that. So I think there's a huge application there.
Mm.
I would love for there to be formal research. I've tried looking up, and I haven't seen any clinical published research on palm cooling before bed. There are some on different cooling techniques before bed, which, you know, if just based on, the underlying physiology, it makes sense, you could, sort of extrapolate and say, okay, well, if lower temperature helps with sleep and you're hot before bed and you apply some sort of cooling modality, that could help. So that makes sense, but not a direct tie here. But I do think there is that's definitely an added bonus or use case where, and it's super easy too. I mean, or if you just wake up in the middle of the night and you're hot, just, grab it, run a few cycles. You don't even have to leave the bed. But that's like people kicking out their feet, from the covers at night trying to cool off. So it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly you can cool down just by kicking one foot outside the blanket, and all of a sudden you just feel this
Oh yeah,
heat coming out of your body.
yeah,
But you haven't, instead of ads, you built a free course that I found you on. I can't remember how I found you, and it was great. Like it was so
yeah.
thorough. I mean, I got my CEUs, but that's what made me want to like, hey, let's bring you on the show. I want to know more about this, who you are. Why'd you go the education route?
Y- Honestly, I don't know. I just sort of had the idea one day where I was just picking my brain, trying to brainstorm. We were struggling a little bit with education because palm cooling, as you know, it's still not mainstream. It's not well known. And I was even at the National Athletic Training Conference and was at a booth there and had a lot of people come by, and 90% of people haven't heard of it. And to no fault of their own, but it's not mainstream or known. So there's this huge science, and there's 100 years of background on thermal regulation, the impact of body temperature. But in the context of performance and then how to optimize it, it's still been pretty light. And in the recent decade or so, temperature's gotten a big kick, but it's largely at the extremes. It's the sauna and the extreme heat and what that does, and then it's the cold plunge and it's the cryotherapy and the extreme cold and what that does. But 99% of your life is spent, just fluctuating back and forth in your thermal neutral zone. And then when you're exercising or you're in hot places or you're in cold places, you're going to start to get to the fringe, and then you're going to have your body's going to start to adapt. So, in the exercise world, we live a lot more on the overheating hyperthermia side. But so what can you do to move the needle just those little bits as opposed to the extreme hormetic shockers? And there's really not that much out there. So I've spent the last few years just deep diving on all this and read hundreds of papers, and I've been feeling like I'm shouting off the, top of a mountain to nobody about why this thing matters. And so I said, here's a different way I can take everything I've already been doing. I'll just bundle up to a course. I've always liked, learning and sharing and just talking about things that excite me. And then I figured that, a good way to give it just a little extra incentive for people to come check it out is apply for some CEUs. So currently it's just NSCA, but previously we had BOC and NASM and AFAA and a few others. And just kind of made it worthwhile to, invite people and just say, hey, here's this information. It's pretty cool. It's fun. And would love more people to know about it. And then just, had that as a free course, just as a way to kind of give back, free education, not necessarily a hard marketing tactic, because it's a little different. It's more, it's evidence-based. It's not the product, although obviously there's, ties to the methodology behind it. But yeah, it was just kind of a fun idea I had, and I figured I might as well try it and enjoyed doing it. And also the other part is also just give back to, I had great athletic trainers and great strength coaches and great people work with me over the years when I was a player, and I've seen how hard the practitioners in the space work, and until I started realizing they had to do CEUs all these years, and they all cost money and stuff. I'm like, oh man, that kind of sucks. So maybe I could give them something in return.
Yeah, I mean, we always want to give back to those who helped us along our journey and on the way, and then even contribute in some way before we leave this planet to make it a little bit better. Yeah. What if you had the choice? And this is just probably a silly question: feet or hands?
Hmm.
If feet weren't so cumbersome to obviously take off shoes and whatnot, out of the two, what would be the more beneficial area to cool to create faster cooling effects?
Is the question purely on efficacy for core body or broader picture? 'Cause I
Uh,
mean, I can answer the both.
yeah, answer them both.
Okay, so I would say efficacy wise, well, I don't know. The feet might be a little bigger. I'm trying to take a look at my foot. It's probably pretty the same. I mean, it's the same
Yeah,
skin. It's the same
yeah, it's the same
concept.
skin.
I
Yeah,
I don't know if there would be a big difference,
yeah,
but I don't know. I feel like your foot's probably. I feel like the sole of your foot's probably a little bigger. So maybe you got more surface area in the foot. So maybe I'd take the foot, but it's close. But in terms of application, I would say the dream, and this is, looking at a bigger roadmap. I'd say it's the feet,
yeah,
and the feet just because hands are used so frequently in life. I mean, forget about sport, just in life. Like you're always using your hands for things. The feet, you know, are mostly just there.
yeah.
You know, so if you could have a passive, 24/7
An insole.
system that worked effectively, and now the feet introduces, from an engineering perspective, a whole lot of challenges. Like, don't get me wrong, that is a mountain to climb. But in the perfect world, I mean, if you could just 24/7 have thermal regulation through your feet, I mean, like, man, like that would be like my if I had a magic wand or a genie with three wishes, that'd be one of them. Is just make something that has your feet automatically just be able to rapidly heat or cool you down as needed. I mean, like, that'd be amazing.
I guess just going barefoot would be the solution to that.
Yeah, well, so I mean, barefoot would help a lot, especially if you're outside, because typically the ground and grass, even in the summer,
It's
is
cool.
cool, generally
Yeah,
speaking, and it's a massive heat sink. So I mean, the ground and the earth can absorb so much heat.
yeah.
Uh, so if you could afford to be, outside in cool grass all the time, then good on you.
Where do you see the industry in recovery performance? Where do you see it going? I mean, there's so much new, feels like there's so much new information coming out. Where do you see it going into the future?
Hmm, that's a good question. Well, broader recovery, yeah, I don't even know. I mean, it's evolving all the time, and there's so much there. Yeah, it definitely seems as though the broader recovery is a lot more wellness. It's a lot more of, what would maybe be considered fringe biohacking 10 years ago is now becoming more mainstream.
Mhm.
And it seems as though the recovery direction is more generally in the pursuit of just overall wellness and longevity, and then supporting the body to function the way it's optimally meant to function. Less hacks and more, let's just get the body to actually work the way it's supposed to, return it to its baseline and optimal state, which is kind of a cop out answer because that's just a bunch of words that are pretty vague and don't really mean much. In my specific case, though, because I'm focused on the temperature, I think temperature is going to become one of the main levers. I think it's grown tremendously on the extremes with the hot and cold. I think there's a lot more evidence growing towards the role of temperature in that middle ground and in the day to day. And I mean, if you just look in sport and activity, um, more and more emphasis on heat. FIFA's got new cooling and hydration rules. The Australian Open just had their new heat rules and all their stuff going on. It's everywhere in sport, and it's everywhere in society culturally. I mean, Phoenix last year, 100 plus straight days of 100 Fahrenheit, and there's not going to be a single July going forward that isn't, dominated by headlines about heat records. And and then bigger picture, this isn't necessarily the recovery market, but bigger picture is one thing that's on my mind. And if I could solve any problem, I think this is a problem I'd want to solve. And I think cooler is a step in the right direction, but still miles and miles away. Is just the air conditioning paradox is one of the greatest global challenges in the world. And the whole premise behind that is there's 3 billion people on Earth that don't have access to air conditioning, many of which live in low wealth nations close to the equator, probably where they need it the most. But air conditioning is inherently extraordinarily inefficient and expensive.
Yeah,
You're fighting thermodynamics, so the efficiency is low. And So there's, the air conditioning paradox is just one of those feedback loops where it's, hey, we got all these people that the world needs more cooling. Okay, great. So here's air conditioning, and air conditioning is extraordinarily expensive and inefficient. And you try to solve the problem, and then that makes the problem bigger. And there's no satisfactory solution. But the vision I see is, when you're using air conditioning, you're cooling the ambient environment to make it easier for your body to adapt to more favorable environmental conditions. So you've got office buildings and houses and the cubic footage. I mean, it's outrageous amount of space that you're trying to cool. It's that outrageous amount of heat that you're trying to transfer, which requires a lot of energy. But what really matters isn't the ambient conditions. What matters is your body's temperature and your core and your ability to adapt. Because like you could go for a run and it could be winter.
Yep.
But once you get 10, 20 minutes in, if your body's hot, I mean, you could be out in a t-shirt and it could be,
Yep.
pick your temperature and you feel fine for some period of time.
Yep.
At the same way you could be, if you just get out of an ice bath and it's, you're down in Florida and it's July, but you're still cold. I mean, the heat isn't the problem.
Nope.
It's what is your temperature. So if we can optimize the body and thermal regulation so that we're more efficient at cooling and heating ourselves as needed, and in this case, more focused on cooling, so that we can be more resilient to whatever ambient conditions we're in. I think that's where you're going to have potential at scale, just as humanity as a whole, in the coming decades is how can we augment thermal regulation so that as the world gets hotter or we have people that are in hot situations and, that's just going to be an inevitable fact of life, are we more resilient to that and able to adapt and still be healthy, in the way we function internally?
There's your new market is, South America or along the equator, portable
Yeah.
air conditioner in your pocket. Be
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you've seen probably those neck fans that, get a
Yeah.
lot more popular and different
Yep.
things, or you see them at like Disneyland and whatnot.
Yep.
So there's definitely a market for it. Uh, yeah, lot of work to be done to build and develop that at scale. But the
Mm.
problem of overheating is never going to go away.
No.
That's going to be, it's always going to be there. I think it's just going to take time for the technology to catch up to get to the consumer level where it's at a low enough price point and easy enough to use and effective enough that justifies it. So the tech roadmap it's a long tech roadmap, but it's there and it's inevitable. And there's other adjacent technologies that are driving towards those innovations as well. So one thing that actually this is a bit of a segue, but I'll share this here is one thing that excites me is with AI. So AI is booming, and AI has massive data requirements, and it requires massive data centers.
Yeah.
Data centers, their number one challenge is overheating. How do you
Yep.
keep them cool? So because of the AI boom, the amount of technology being developed for small portable devices as well as for large data centers on increased cooling. So there's an entire industry behind cooling efficiency. So I almost feel that in the personal world, personal cooling world that I live in, it doesn't have the firepower, the juice that AI has. But I guarantee that the AI industry is going to spin out really, really good small, mobile, portable cooling technologies and heat sinks and innovations that are going to be able to be pulled into use cases like what we're doing. So, highly bullish on the future, but I don't know what that time horizon looks like or what, how it's going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, the being first to market, it's always an uphill climb because people don't know about it. So now your job is educating, and education
Hmm.
to the masses is so slow unless you have a massive marketing budget where you can just bomb it.
Right.
And
Right.
it can be tedious, but if you can stick it out for the long run, and then hopefully not necessarily competitors, but people who are running parallel to more educate on the need or the benefits of body cooling in an efficient way, hopefully just kind of catapults, because then people are saying,
Hmm.
oh, what's this Palmer cooling? Oh, there's this device over here. And all of a sudden you're on one big podcast and your products go up in sales 500x.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well, you never know. There, you could always be one event away, and
yep,
Hyperice had that moment with Kobe, and I know Whoop had Phelps and LeBron and some other guys using theirs, and you just never know. So
yep,
you're right. If any new product or service, you got to show up to bat every day. You got to take your swings,
yep,
and you got to do everything in your power to be proximal to opportunity, and
yep,
then hopefully be as ready as you can when it comes. But things work in due course. You're right. It takes time. Compounding is slow. All great consumer products thrive and excel off word of mouth, and word of mouth is the slowest of all, which is difficult because you can force feed initial adoption if you got a big enough budget. It's like a lot of venture-backed companies, subsidize things and just get it out there, which maybe works for the Airbnbs and the Ubers, but probably not so much us. But to your point, it's not even so much first to market, but it's first to scale,
Yeah.
and market's a lot easier to get to than scale. So we got our work cut out for us.
Well, it's going to be awesome. I have this feeling it's a cool product. Like it's so smart, so simple. If you could give one piece of advice to athletes or professionals transitioning out of their first identity, what would it be?
I would look up ikigai. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's the Japanese concept of I don't even remember off the top of my head, but find the intersection between your strengths and your purpose and your passion. And whatever you're doing next, if you want to do anything meaningful, it's gonna be hard. So it's much more tolerable to do hard things when you enjoy it and are excited about it. It's much less enjoyable doing hard things that you don't like. So
So find that thing that you just love suffering with and keep going with it.
yeah, exactly. And I don't necessarily mean to be in the camp of saying just follow your passion, nothing else matters, because having competency matters, and and making money matters if you want to live and live a life that's up to the standards and in line with what your goals are, and especially if you're supporting a family and whatnot. So I don't want to go black and white and say, oh, just follow your passion, everything will be fine. But at some way, whether it's developed over time or it's there, I would strongly encourage finding something that lines up with what you love to do or what you care about.
Well, that's a great closer. Where can people find you, my friend?
Uh, so pretty much everywhere. Our website, getcooler.com. That's Kuhler. Instagram at getcooler. You can find me on LinkedIn. We've got Cooler Technologies on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest ways. I mean, I don't know where else everyone's going. We got a TikTok too. We don't use it as much, but yeah, Instagram, LinkedIn, website, all the
Amazing.
above.
And we'll have a link. And we'll have a link to your website on the show notes so that people can go have a look and pick up
Awesome.
a little cooler, a little portable air conditioner in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah,
All right, man.
easy,
Well,
easy.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your finding you and your education side of things. I think it's going to be awesome. So I'm excited to see what you come up with in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Braeden.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Staying Relevant. If you enjoyed it, check out the AMT certification at amtcertified.ca, where we help clinicians and coaches get better results faster. Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and share this with a coach, clinician, or athlete who needs to hear. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep staying relevant.